Hello, everyone, and welcome to a fresh new hour of HQ. I'm Katie Mox. Happy New Year. Hopefully you enjoyed your New Year's Eve. Maybe you're a little bit slower moving this morning. That's okay. We got you covered with all that you need to know in the world of sports, starting with the Rose Bowl, where my girl Jacqueline D'Agostino is ready to kick us off. Looking like a rose yourself, sister.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I knew we were going to be talking about the Rose Bowl, of course. I had to go with like the pink color tones, the rose tones, if you will. Thanks so much, Katie. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, and of course the CFP quarters. Those are just rolling along for your New Year's Day. I keep calling it the Bucks versus the Ducks. Has a nice ring to it, right, for the Rose Bowl. Now, the last time these two teams faced off, Oregon and Ohio State, back on October 12th, it was a wild game, a wild finish, a wild final drive, and Oregon came out alive, beating the Buckeyes by just one. We know it's a tough feat to beat a good team once, let alone try to beat them twice, and that is what Oregon and Dan Lanning's squad, they're going to try to do just that. So right now, let's welcome in Josh Pate and Brad Crawford, who are joining us from Pasadena ahead of the Rose Bowl. It sounds very loud there, gentlemen. There's a good crowd behind you. So before we get into the matchup and everything for Oregon, Ohio State, paint the picture for us. What are the vibes like out there at the Rose Bowl ahead of this matchup?
Vibes. Okay, let's see. Bright, sunny, loud, good base tan setting in right now. So maybe our own rose color, but on the skin. I think there's an interesting national vibe here, Brad, as opposed to maybe like a localized vibe. So each of these programs enter the season knowing we're going to measure ourselves against each other. And they scored off the first time, and it was an instant classic. Everyone expects that here today. But then you've also got the backdrop of knowing, hey, if we win, they'll drop some confetti, because that's apparently a thing we do now in quarterfinals, but we still got two more to go. So it's like, I don't know, they're two sides of the coin to me.
Now, I think Oregon fans really made this trip. I mean, we see it out here now. There's so many more Oregon fans than Ohio State. Oregon being the top seed in this playoff, the only unbeaten in college football. And how about that first playoff game against Ohio State? Arguably the best roster in college football. So Oregon-Ohio State has a national championship game feel to it. But like you said, there's still more wins ahead of these two teams.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a lot more green and yellow behind you than I'm seeing red at this very moment. Let's talk about the Buckeyes, because they lose to Michigan, which of course is just gut-wrenching for Ryan Day and that fan base. They respond, drop a 40-burger on Tennessee, make quite the statement. Pate, I'll start with you. Is that enough, what you saw from Ohio State against Tennessee? Is that enough, in your opinion, to feel comfortable that they can maybe hang with Oregon and beat this Oregon team that's undefeated?
I think seeing him against Oregon the first time gave me a lot more confidence than seeing him against Tennessee. Here's what confidence I got out of that. I got the confidence that the Michigan game's been put in the rearview mirror. That's the confidence I got from watching them against Tennessee. But from the way Oregon will present themselves defensively versus what Tennessee did to, you know, the way this game played out the first time, I just don't carry a lot over. It's about 50 or 60 degrees warmer here today. The crowd split. It's just a beautiful scene here. But in practical football terms, Jacqueline, I wonder to myself, when we walked off the field the first time that these two played, all the talk was, why didn't we run the ball in the second half? We had 122 on the ground in the first half, 19 on the ground in the second half, but yet recently, last 10 days, it's, boy, if that passing game shows up like it did against Tennessee, then, and I just don't know sometimes if that doesn't maybe bait you into getting away from what it actually takes, Brad, to win a game against a specific opponent.
Well, Dillon Gabriel also had a Heisman-esque performance in that first game, played one of his better games of the season, sort of what started his Heisman campaign, part of the reason why he was a finalist. And Ohio State in that first game gave up a number of big plays that we haven't seen Jim Knowles' secondary give up. So I think sort of the focus over these last few weeks in preparation for Oregon, Ohio State, knowing that if they beat Tennessee, they'd play Oregon, is just not allowing these big plays again. Tez Johnson got open several times down the field. Dillon Gabriel dropped the ball in the bucket like he's done throughout the season in that first game. So I think Ohio State, we may see a better performance defensively compared to what we saw 2.5 months ago.
Okay, we're going to get more into that in just a moment on what team has changed the most over the last 2.5 months. But first, let's talk about Oregon, because Dillon Gabriel, the Heisman finalist here, leads this team to a Big Ten championship, their first year in the conference. They haven't played since then in about 25 days. Brad, is there any part of you that feels like, maybe there's a rust factor there at all? Or are you not concerned about having the 25 days off? Does that work in their favor at this point?
Now, I think it does help Ohio State in the fact that Ohio State just played its best game under Ryan Day in several years against Tennessee. He's scoring so many points, going up 21-0. Jeremiah Smith, you know, we already knew his name, but he had a phenomenal game against the Vols. And here we are, Oregon. We saw them give up almost 300 yards last time out. The run defense was not the elite defense that we've seen most of the year. And Dylan Gabriel, you know, he has not played in 25 days, as you mentioned. So right now the hotter quarterback is Will Howard, despite him playing a Heisman finalist in Dylan Gabriel. So I think as far as momentum goes, the edge goes to Ohio State.
Yeah, all that stuff wears off usually after the first quarter, but, you know, first quarter could decide a game for all we know. I've always viewed this, and I'll continue to view this in sort of a case-by-case basis. There's a world where Oregon comes out and goes up 21-3 because they're rested. It's unlikely, but there's a world where that happens. There's also a world where Ohio State comes out red hot and Oregon looks a little discombobulated. Keep in mind, this offense, this passing game is so based on precision, timing, rhythm, and normally you want to boom, boom, boom. You want to keep doing what you're doing. You don't want that rest. You don't want that time off unless you're unhealthy, which they weren't. So I don't know. You could play this game one time and it's a factor. You could play it another time and it's not a factor. I think it's the kind of thing you have to feel out in the first quarter.
All right, let's go back to October 12th, because as alluded to, you guys mentioned some changes that you saw specifically with Ohio State maybe, but Oregon makes out alive of that one. Pate, Jeremiah Smith saying, hey, they're going to see a totally different player this time around that when we face this Oregon team. What team has changed the most, in your opinion, since October 12th?
I would say it's Ohio State, but I would say that, Jacqueline, conditionally, because I think Oregon would tell you the same thing. The reason I say it about Ohio State is because I think a lot of the fog got cleared, so to speak, as to what they should do. And you're talking about Jeremiah Smith, and rightfully so, and he was the one who said it. And I think a lot of people who are talking about a different Ohio State, they will say that, Brad, because of offensive reasons. I actually think it because of defensive reasons, because when they faced Oregon last time around, they didn't get either thing you need to get. What I mean by that is you got to either get home and affect Dylan Gabriel. They had 0 sacks, so they didn't do that. Or you got to make them go on long, sustained drives. 4 of Oregon's 6 scoring drives the first time around were 5 plays or less. So they didn't affect the quarterback, but they also gave up chunk plays. And to me, for all the talk about the passing game and all the talk about the offense, that is actually what will decide whether they flip the script this time around.
And I think for me, it's the Ohio State defensive line. We saw them get after Nico last week against Tennessee and really frustrate him. They shut down the run game. Dylan Sampson for Tennessee was out 2 plays in. This Ohio State defensive front, maybe it's been not as elite as we thought has been all season, but last time out played really well. If they can get pressure on Dylan Gabriel today, force him into some maybe early mistakes, get an early lead in this game, maybe the Buckeyes have that confidence that they did not have on the road at Oregon. That's something, too, that we haven't mentioned. That was a road game, and Ohio State simply ran out of time. They were in position almost to kick the field goal to win that game. So I think Ohio State goes into this game with confidence, especially along the defensive front.
And you have to think maybe there's a little bit more confidence going into this game, knowing that they are slight favorites against Oregon here, 2.5-point favorites. And Brad, I know you mentioned you think Ohio State has a slight edge here. So that feels right to you? You think Ohio State is going to come out on top?
I think Ohio State's the favorite for a reason. I am picking Ohio State in this game. But, man, this is plenty of bulletin board to the #1 team in the country, okay? Like I said, the only college football remaining unbeaten is an underdog in its own backyard here in Pasadena with a ton of Oregon fans here. So if I'm Dan Lanning, pregame, Josh, there's plenty of material I have to show them. They still don't respect us, #1 team in the country.
Yeah, there are a lot of there's a call called disconcerting signals, Jacqueline, in college football. There's some disconcerting signs behind us in reference to Dan Lanning. Check my Twitter if you need any further details there. I'm going to Oregon, man. You know, I listened to the Ohio State coaching staff all week. I don't think they were lying when they said, hey, we think Oregon's a better team now than when we played them. And you go back and watch the game. Granted, there are always opportunities left on the field. I thought Oregon left a fair amount of opportunity on the field in that game. They won the game, so everyone forgets it. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to take Oregon plus the points because I think they're going to win the game outright. And afterwards, the same dumb conversation that we were engaged in 2 weeks ago with Ryan Day somehow, some way creeps its way back in.
You know, Ryan Day in the big moments. We always talk about it. He can't escape it. Pate, Brad, we certainly appreciate it. And now we're all going to be going on Pate's Twitter to see what the heck these signs are saying behind you. For more Josh Pate, make sure you check out Josh Pate's College Football Show 3 days a week in your feed on YouTube, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you check it out.